Good morning, everyone. I'm Bernice A. King, CEO of the King Center and niece of Dr. Christine King Farris. As you know, on yesterday, we announced the passing of Dr. Christine King Farris, who's a founding board member of the King Center, a former vice chair and treasurer, esteemed educator of 64 years, and sister of Martin Luther King Jr., and I believe the longest-standing member of Ebenezer Baptist Church. We, along with the entire King family and Farris family, civil rights activists, the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, the academic family, people of goodwill, celebrate the life of our beloved servant and, for us, King family matriarch. I want to say how ironic this great, esteemed, longtime educator transitions on the same day as the Supreme Court strikes down affirmative action. We'll talk about that a little later. But I want to take this time to thank everyone for their prayers, their condolences, and their outreach on behalf of the family. Now I'm going to introduce Isaac Newton Farris Jr., who is the oldest son of Dr. Christine King Farris and the late Isaac Newton Farris Sr., and also a former CEO and president here at the King Center. So let's receive Isaac Farris.
Thank you, Bernice, and thank you all for being here on this occasion. For those of you out there that have suffered the loss of a mother, I don't have to tell you how difficult that can be, even though this was expected. But still, it's hard to deal with. I am happy she transitioned on yesterday morning, probably in the early a.m. She was aware of her surroundings until the end, and I stress that because she did not hear about the unfortunate thing that the Supreme Court did, which would have affected her on two levels. Obviously, the civil rights tie of it, but she gave the majority of her life to Spelman College, so as a college professor, and also the inequities that she suffered in her life. Her initial thing was to go to Harvard, but in her time, she could not attend Harvard, but she did wind up at Columbia, and her initial dream was to get an MBA and come back here to Atlanta and run Citizens Trust Bank. But it turned out not only was she the only black in the MBA school, but she was the only female, and just did not have the support, and I think that's why she wound up getting 2 master's degrees from Columbia, trying to refigure her life path. That's not to imply that she had any regret about what ended up being her life path. I think she was very happy to be a part of her brother's work, her sister-in-law's work here at the King Center, her work at Ebenezer Baptist Church, in Spelman College. And I think if I had to sum up my mother, I think she is the premier example of, and I say this humbly, but power behind the throne, so to speak, because that's what she was to this legacy. And it's not a one-hit legacy. And I say this with all due humility. We appropriately refer to the Kennedy family in this country as American royalty for the impact that family has had. The impact that our family, actually the Williams King Farris family, have had on this community and America is very similar. They didn't, in Montgomery, they didn't call Uncle Emil because they knew what they were getting. They asked Uncle Emil to lead the Montgomery bus boycott because he was son of Martin Luther King Sr., a known commodity in Black America, who was the son-in-law of A.D. Williams, a known commodity in Black America. And so Mother has, though, been there, her role for us and for them, for Uncle Emil, for Martin Luther King Sr., even as a child. At the age of 2, it was my mother that discovered my great-great-grandfather, the great A.D. Williams, who's responsible, by the way, for the first black high school here in Atlanta, Booker T. Washington High School. It was my mother that found him dead in that birth home right up the street, the same home that she was born in and that Uncle Emil was born in. It was her that supported my grandfather in his struggles, and it was her that supported Uncle Retta. We wouldn't be here without Uncle Retta. We wouldn't have what has happened in this community without Uncle Retta. But Uncle Retta couldn't have done it without Mother. And so she's been that power. I think it's appropriate. That's probably why God allowed her to be the last to leave of that generation, because she was that one that was there. She was the first to meet Uncle Retta because Granddaddy had other plans for who my uncle was going to marry. It was her that lent him the money for the engagement ring. She was there with Uncle Retta in '68 to help raise Bernice, Dexter, Martin, and Yolanda. She was there in 1969 when our other uncle, our Bernice and I's other uncle, Reverend A.D. Williams, was taken from us, most likely murdered from us, but she helped raise Aunt Naomi, raise my cousins, her kids. She was a backbone at Ebenezer Baptist Church. She was the, in history, longest serving faculty member of Spelman College, as well as Bernice mentioned, Ebenezer. So she was there throughout it all. The only time and if you look hard enough, you'll see her. And Mother was not the type of person that needed attention or to be out front. But she was there at every march. The only one she wasn't there was a march on Washington, and probably because of me, she had just given birth. But other than that, she was there, working behind the scenes, supporting her brother. So that's what she has been for this family. We don't have all of the concrete plans yet. I can say to you that the funeral will be in approximately 2 weeks. I know that might seem long, but But we're dealing with history here. As I mentioned, and I say it with all humility, but there is no other person there is only one other person that our nation stops every year, shuts down to commemorate. You all know it is President's Day, but it's really George Washington's birthday. But as you know, there is a King holiday. So we're dealing with a lot of stuff here, and there's protocol since what we are dealing with here. Things that have to be coordinated. For instance, there will be a public viewing at the historic Ebenezer, as well as at Spelman College. I can't tell you the precise dates, but they're just logistics. There will certainly be a national element that has already reached out and wants to participate in the funeral. I can't tell you it will not be a long funeral, but there are some logistics that need to be worked out. So you'll certainly be hearing from us when we, figure all of that out. I think I've said it all. I just want to conclude by saying she served our family legacy well, and I stress that's the Williams King Farris legacy. Martin Luther King Jr. just did not pop up. As a child, he saw his father march on Atlanta City Hall over the treatment of Atlanta blacks. I can assure you it was much more life-threatening and dangerous in the 1930s for Martin Luther King Sr. to lead a demonstration on Atlanta City Hall than it was for Martin Luther King Jr. to lead a march on Washington. But he grew up, so I guess you could say the Kennedys would be known as a political dynasty. I guess, Bernice, we would have a religious and human rights dynasty. So that's what we're dealing with here. And the matriarch, the last standing woman, it has left us. And so not only just doing it for ourselves and doing, I guess, what's normally done, we aside from grieving, we have history concerns and protocol concerns here that for us and for a lot of people in this nation and world. And on that note, for anyone who we're live streaming, and so anyone who happens to be watching now, I have received, oh my God, an overwhelming reach out from all over this country. And I have not responded to anyone because I just needed to take yesterday and just, there were a couple of things we had to do in terms of my mother's body. She passed away very peacefully at my sister's home. Very peacefully. That she had no pain in the end, which was, my mother was born prematurely, and they didn't know if she would make it. So she struggled to come into the world, and she was born so early they didn't even have a crib for her. And if you take the tour through the home, they'll show you a replica of the chiffero that she slept in the first couple of nights. And on that note, it's ironic, if you tour that home, they have done a marvelous job, and I see our superintendent back here. Thank you for being here, Judy. They have done a marvelous job of literally recreating how the home looked. when our parents lived there. But the only stuff that's authentic, right down to the doll on the bed in that house, is my mother's room. Literally. That literally is the bed she slept in. That's the doll she played with. That's her dresser. Those are her skates. I mean, literally. I mean, everything else looks like it did for everybody else's room. But for some reason, my mother's stuff was the only one that survived. I mean, the entire suite that she had. Here again, that's that power, I don't know. But not to get too wordy, I just wanted to say to anyone out there, you will hear from me. But I have heard you. And so don't take the non-response as that I was ignoring or did not get it. I just needed a day. Just a day. Even though we knew it was going to happen. And it happened under the best circumstances. I needed that day. So thank you. If there are any questions, both Bernice and I will be happy to take. Yes. Maria, how you doing? Thank you.
Maria, supporter report. You had the big celebration a year ago, I guess, for her 90th. And how important is that, looking back, that y'all were able to celebrate her life in such a magnificent way over at the historic Ebenezer?
First off, that was actually her 95th.
95th, I'm sorry.
We did her 90th actually in the backyard of the birth home. And here again, thanks to the Park Service for cooperating and making that happen. It was really lovely. And it gave a chance for some people who had not been through the birth home to see the birth home. But symbolically, it was important. And in terms of your question, yes, that was very important. One, because it was, Mother's life was so full of music, and that there was a lot of music involved in that. And that's going to be an element of our goodbye, retinue, something similar to that. So it was very important. But also, I think what Bernice and myself and what everybody, as a matter of fact, when I was talking to Martin yesterday, Martin III, he referenced how he remembered at the end of the service, Mother sang, and it surprised everybody because she sang, and she sang strong. I mean, it was like, my God, and it was spontaneous, right? It was spontaneous. It was not planned at all. I mean, she was just supposed to be there and enjoy. And certainly we didn't want to overtax her, but my sister picked up a vibe from her. She sensed how she was feeling into the program, and she sang for us. And I mean, so that I think it's important for those type of last memories, and it also indicated how much she was still with us and a part. So that was very, very important. Any others?
Good morning. I'm Brian Mills from Channel 2. You touched on this a little bit already, but I'd just like to hear you expand on it some more about how much your mother, the influence she had on her younger brother, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Well, he writes about it, and he talks about, hey, I didn't join the church because, I wanted to be a minister or I was touched by God or any of that. I joined the church because I saw my big sister join the church. So he followed her. And that's what I'm saying. It was that type of relationship, not only with him, but with us, but with our grandparents. I mean, she was that go-to person. And I think it certainly went beyond us, because in my frequent travels across the country, I mean, there are many, many cities that I go to where I don't run into a black female that talks to me about how my mother taught them at Spelman. And sometimes they thought she was the roughest thing that they had encountered, and they are so grateful now for having her in their lives, because that's the type of giver that she was. And she, you know, on one hand, because she did not require a lot of attention and did not promote herself or push herself out, you might say she was shy, but she really was not shy. She was a strong, you know, but she just asserted herself in different ways than maybe we are used to seeing. I only saw my mother, of all the tragedies that our family has dealt with, I only saw my mother lose it one time. And that was in 1969, when we were in the basement of Aunt Coretta's home, where the center started, and Bernice and her siblings and Aunt Coretta were in Jamaica, along with Aunt Naomi and her kids, and Mother, and I was in another room playing, and Mother got the message that Uncle A.D. had been found in his backyard pool, drowned. And I heard my mother scream and cry like I never heard before or since. And I think the only reason why she lost it like that is because it came so close to us losing Uncle Mel. And I think it was just a lot for her to handle, because she was that support that everybody turned to in those times. And she was there for everybody. She was there for Aunt Coretta, she was there for Aunt Naomi, she was there for my grandfather. And there again for Aunt Naomi when two of our cousins died, you know, at a young age. So we've had, and that's not to say families don't experience death, every family does. But, and then the biggest blow to us all, and the time, and I guess Uncle A.D. had fortified it for her, but the biggest blow to us all, the biggest well, I won't say biggest tragedy, but the thing that hurt us the most, that shook us, that shook our, just for a minute, shook our commitment, you know, to the beloved principles, was when our grandmother was shot down in the church, because we never expected that. We didn't want to see what happened to Uncle Emil, but we knew what could happen to Uncle Emil. But to have our grandmother taken in church by an assassin was really, really, really hard for us. So, but she was strong through that. It didn't shake her, it didn't shake Aunt Coretta, but it shook some of us in our generation. But she was strong for that. So the only time was Uncle A.D. And that's not to say that she didn't weep, but I never saw her lose it, except that one time. Sorry to be so wordy. I think I saw you were trying to say something. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. My name is Olivia Wakeham with the AJC, and I was just curious what you hope that, you know, this young generation of upcoming civil rights activists and leaders will take from your mother's legacy.
Well, I hope, and Bernice might have some comments on this as well. I hope it spurs them to really learn about not only mother's legacy, but Uncle Mel's legacy. Because there's a lot of great activity happening in the newest or the coming generation. We see it happening every day, and we see the activity. But there is a lack of knowledge about completely the process. You know, in school, unfortunately, kids, they learn about the civil rights movement, but really all they learn about is the protest. I mean, there's not a lot of emphasis on what happened to get to the protest. You know, Uncle Emil would have never, even if he had the technology, sent out an all call or text or whatever, hey, meet me at City Hall, we getting ready to protest. I mean, he just wouldn't have done that because he knew that what sometimes happened is, you know, you don't know what element shows up there. There's no planning, there's no, you know, you lose control. He had a perfect record. 100%. There was zero property destruction or violence at any demonstration on Columbia. And I'm not talking about just physical violence. You couldn't show up and see a sign that said death to George Wallace, hang the Klan. I mean, you could, even the language at his demonstration. So what I hope is that they would do that deep dive, because there are a lot of young people that think they're following in his footsteps, and they're just following in one aspect of it. I mean, there are 6 steps. Well, actually, five steps before you get to the 6, but I'm saying there's 5 before, four before you get to demonstrating. I mean, so, and that's not to, hey, Black Lives Matter has been a great thing. But just think, if they had really followed the roadmap, how much further along that they would be. I mean, part of the problem that they've had is that there was really no kind of structure. I mean, it was like, you know, just in a sense, let's raise hell. And I mean, there's a structured way to raise hell. And then within it, I mean, you know, shutting down a highway, well, that's the atomic bomb of demonstrating, right? There are levels, like we have in warfare. You know, there's conventional weapons, bombs, and then there's a nuclear. You know what I'm saying? And shutting down a highway or shutting down a store that really is not directly related to your issue, that's nuclear state. That's when nobody is responding to the other stuff you've done. And so you keep ratcheting it up, non-violently, of course. But you don't start out by shutting down, and you really don't start out by protesting without really going through the steps.
The other part, I think, that's so important about what they can learn from her is, you know, Isaac talked about the fact that Aunt Christine did a lot of stuff without needing any fanfare or attention. And in this celebritized culture, oftentimes things get lost because people are doing it for the wrong reasons. And it's important to have a servant's heart and posture in terms of trying to challenge a lot of these issues. I mean, she was a force to be reckoned with. And so I wanted to add that bit as well. And I also just wanted to say additionally that for me, and I'm sure for Isaac, one of the things that really was hard for me yesterday is that every time she was there, through everything we went through, she was there. She wasn't there yesterday. And the void, because even though there was a void when I lost my mom and I was with her in Mexico, suddenly lost my sister, and Christine was still there. So it's like, wow. is really on us. She will be thoroughly missed. And the irony is, she went one day before her mother was assassinated in the church. Today is the anniversary of our grandmother's assassination in church, 1974. So just wanted to mention that as well. Any other questions?
My name is Abby. I work with Atlanta News First. I wanted to see if either one of you wanted to share your last conversations that you had and what an impact that you can carry with you from that last conversation.
I think, we did a lot of our conversations that Angela and I had with her towards the end. We did a lot of reminiscing and talking about things. And, I don't want to give her word by word, but essentially, she was like, I'm proud of what you and my nieces and nephews have done and what you are doing. I want you to know that your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your aunts and uncles are proud of you too. And so I think that was her kind of way of saying what Bernice just said is kind of on you now to really, I'm kind of leaving. And as I said, I mean it really with us. I know how things are structured, and that's changing in this country, but I really, and I said that with all humility, the comparison to the Kennedy family. But if you go back and look at that footage, the first arrest, I mean, the wisdom was born out, the first arrest of Uncle Emil in Montgomery. If you go back and look at that footage, my grandfather had to come all the way from Atlanta to pay his bail. Now, it was a high bill, but the richest black man at the time in America lived in the area. There were people, and I'm not saying this criticizing anybody, that was life or death issues we're talking about. I'm saying it was challenging the white establishment, right? And so I'm not criticizing it. That was, you could put your life in danger for giving the money to bail him out. And if they certainly had the resources to pool together, but the times were what they were. So there was a Martin Luther King Sr. who was able to do that. And just one other thing, and Maria, you probably can relate to this being a native, and at least a second generation Atlanta. You might be even like Bernice and I, we're I guess fourth generation Atlantans. So, yeah. But nobody will admit it now, and Atlanta's the cradle of the civil rights movement. But nobody wanted Uncle Emil to come here and start at CLC. No black people. That's the truth. Nobody will admit that now. But he had to come here because this was the only place he could be protected and do the work. His father, Martin Luther King Sr., had the relationships with the mayor, the chief of police, who would call and tell him, hey, the FBI has reached out, they're bugging you. The FBI is doing X. The only time Uncle Emil was arrested in Georgia, they had to catch him in DeKalb County. He was on safe ground in Atlanta and Fulton County. Because of the relationships and the clout and the strength that Martin Luther King Sr. had. Now, we call Atlanta the cradle because of not only King, but what has happened here in Atlanta. But Atlanta's got the first black high school, as I mentioned, because of A.D. Williams. The teachers' pay was equalized in Atlanta because of Martin Luther King Sr. You know, we've been on the forefront, you know. And hell, this community has been preserved because of our family. This whole area was going to be a highway until Uncle Retta stepped up to Ivan Allen and said, hey, wait a minute here. You know, we've got to preserve. And so now this community, I think this is the only Olympic, and it was across the street for many years, but I think this is the largest pool in the city, I think. And Uncle Retta at that time, this was a, you know, that's why they wanted to make it a highway, because it was a, you know, an impoverished community by that time, or it was turning. It was beginning to be, and it was a black community. So she wanted a pool here for the students that lived here, because there was a lot of public housing in the area. So, yeah, to answer, I said a lot of things, but essentially she said, proud of what you're doing, keep doing what you're doing. And that was so important. Bernice got a chance to spend time with her in the last days, because she was aging, but she, you know, she didn't have anything like cancer or anything like that, so there was no pain for her. And like I said, she kind of went out the opposite of the way that she came in.
I think we're going to close out after this, but ironically, a few weeks ago, when I think it was Mother's Day, in fact. Is that right, Delise? Delise and I, Delise is my best friend, also works for me. We went to the house to visit, and she looked at us and said, where y'all been? Which we thought was rather strange, because over the last year and a half, she didn't talk very much at all. I mean, she would say hello. But I guess because of the way in which I was dressed, she was wondering, okay, where you been? So that's the last, actually, words that I heard from her to me. And before that time, she would always ask me, how's it going over there at the King Center? She was always concerned about the King Center, up until, you know, she wasn't talking as much anymore. And she and I worked very closely together when we would prepare for the commemorative service. As you know, she and I co-presided for a number of years. And I've missed those calls on the Sunday before the holiday in the evening. Bernice, how we're gonna do this? You have any ideas? Because we would split the program up. So, yeah, she was just such a strong, powerful, full of faith person. And honestly, you know, my mother obviously was very strong in what she did, but Aunt Christine dealt with a lot. And I was just amazed at her ability to be able to go through all of the tragedies she went through, and still stand strong and still be full of faith and love. And in this family, you know, because we were taught so often, and not just taught, our grandparents, our parents exemplified what it meant to forgive, and what it means to forgive. And that's been so important to our family. And I just watched her, because she had every bit of reason to be bitter, you know, with what happened with her brother and her mother. And yet she was not. So she was always a beacon of strength to me. And my mother used to tease me, because she would say, you just like your Aunt Christine, you got all those different shoes. So I did pick up a little bit.
Hey, but that's why I came back up, because Bernice, and we cannot leave here without acknowledging one thing about mother. Okay, somebody asked about it. There's one thing you gotta, if my mother, if she was in the room if she was not the best dressed woman in the room, she was one of the best dressed women in the room, okay? She was a fashionista, not from the standpoint of materialism, being, I mean, but she was, in any room she walked in, you noticed her. I know the other women did. Because that's one thing I hear about from the students, but also when I would talk to ex-faculty members that were there with her, they'd always talk about how she was the best dressed faculty member at Spelman. So yeah, Bernice has picked up some fashion. Look how she's dressed today. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for joining us on today. And as Isaac mentioned, when all of the plans come together, we will make sure that you get that information. And thank you to the King Center staff,
Yes.
and Ameja Kelly, who's a former King Center staff, Mina Bryant, who's currently on staff here in the communications department, and all the other team. Thank you all for today. Thank you, Christian and Mike. God bless you all. Have a wonderful afternoon and weekend. I guess holiday weekend.
Yes.